Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Melissa, but subscribers can call me Missy. In today's video, I'm going to be attempting something that I have never attempted before, and that is designing a wallpaper pattern for my niece's bedroom. My niece is about a year and a half and she is obsessed with animals. So I am going to be including very cute little woodland animals, and I'm going to give each of them a little unicorn horn just for some extra whimsy. So I'm going to go ahead and hop on to that. Speaking of hopping, before actually getting started on the design, I went ahead with my sister and we picked out some colors that we thought would look nice in her room. She already has a whole decorative thing going on, so we wanted it to be complementary to what she already had in the room. Colors in hand, I went back to my messy art studio, ignored the mess, and started drawing. I am accustomed to drawing more realism, so I started out in my comfort zone, just drawing a more true-to-life fox. I let there be a little stylization, but I was just kind of getting warmed up at first. After my initial sketch, I also knew that I wanted the little woodland creatures to be cutesy because it's for a child's bedroom. So I set about trying to figure out what style of cute I wanted them to be. So I redrew the fox, making the head a lot bigger, messing with the proportions a little bit, and it was cute, but I also wanted it to be a little more folksy and a little more simplistic. So I tried to simplify the shapes even more, and I was also inspired by woodcuts, so I was trying to mimic some shapes that you tend to see in folksy woodcuts with this final idea. And let's not forget that each of these creatures must have a unicorn horn. At this point, I felt like I really had a stylistic direction that I wanted to go with, and I was ready to get to sketching some different poses for the fox. It was a lot of fun to play with the shapes and figure out what worked best with this new style language that I was working with. I also busted out my colored pencils just to get a feel for what the colors might look like, just in the very basicest sense, because it's very different colors from what we picked out. I had picked out a few woodland animals that I wanted to draw, and the next one was a frog. The first iteration that I had wasn't quite in the same style language that I had drawn the fox with, so I had to revisit and refigure out how I was going to do that, but now with a frog body. I did a couple more animals off camera because I didn't have time to wait for my camera batteries to charge. So there is also a bear and a duck and a deer that I'm not showing the process for, but I brought the camera back to draw the bunnies. As you can see from this shot, I struggled to figure out how to set up my camera. I would like to eventually get a better rig for these kinds of drawing videos, but I worked with what I had. And again, you can see me trying to figure out what my style language was with the rabbits. It's just a little bit different because it's a different animal, but I still want it to feel like it belongs with the other animals stylistically. I also had references pulled up just on Pinterest of rabbits that I had next to me while I worked. I did a similar thing with the other creatures, which really helped me to get an idea of how to make the bodies, but then I could just play with them and make them more cutesy. For each of my sketches, I tried to do pretty much the same set of poses for the animals, and that was also really fun to just try and figure out what each pose would look like with the different animal bodies. So I drew each of the animals in a sitting pose, a leaping pose, a more bent over pose. But this final pose for the rabbit is not something I did for any of the other creatures. It felt more distinctly rabbit in nature. I would like to now draw your attention to my phone screen and just reassure you that that cracked up mess is the screen protector and not the actual screen. But enough of that distraction, because now I'm going to show you the other animals that I had drawn. This is a set of little bears. Then I also did a set of little ducks, which are super duper cute. And a set of deer. And finally, you're going to see how the frogs ended up. Look at them frogs. I like the leaping one the best. And the sitting one. They're both cute. I ended up sending photos of all of these designs to my sister so that she could tell me which one and which pose from each animal she liked the best, so I knew which ones to incorporate in the design. I was about ready to start my design when I realized that I wanted some flowers inserted into the design, and I didn't know exactly what style language I wanted for the flowers. So I found a set of woodland flowers, poppy, thistle, and a couple others, but I can't remember what they were. And I just took those and simplified the shapes and made them look more stylistically like they would belong with the little woodland creatures. From a young age, I've always been artistically interested in providing the most detail into my images and creating more realism. So it was really a fun exercise to really stop at the more simplistic forms. And I say stop at the simplistic forms because when you're drawing realism, it helps to start with simplistic forms and then build off of those. Now for this portion, as you can see, I've begun working on the final pattern making, which of course is the thing that I have never tried before. But I hearkened back to an art lesson that I had back in elementary school about tessellations, because I wanted this pattern to have a lot of flow to it. I didn't want it to feel like it was built up like brick on brick, but just that the shapes kind of flowed into one another. And so tessellations essentially allow you to have odd shapes that fit together perfectly and are able to be repeated over and over and over again. And the oddness of those shapes helps to break up the image to our brains. So for this first shot at making a tessellation pattern, I started by drawing the fox and some little flowers around it. And then I went ahead and moved those shapes as I needed them to be in order to actually form the tessellation shape. I'm not sure if I'm using the language correctly, but hopefully I'm getting the idea across. After reconfiguring my paper, I went ahead and taped it all down on the back so that I could continue drawing again on the front. As I worked on this, I had my sketches open so that I could reference them and I wouldn't have to just continuously reinvent these little shapes and creatures. I could just put them onto my pattern as I saw fit. When I was done drawing in the little deer, I had to decide which flower I wanted to pair with it. I had to kind of make these decisions on the fly, and I just kind of figured which one I thought would probably not have the same colors in the flower as would end up being in the animal, even though I wasn't 100% sure which color will be in the animal or in the flowers necessarily. I'm still not entirely sure. I do need to mess with the colors a bit. But after I drew in the little deer, I realized that the tessellation I had created was a little bit more boxy than I wanted it to be. So I went ahead and started all over again. And this time I decided to draw in 3 of the animals at once. That way I could let the other animals help inform the shape that the tessellation would take at the end when I was cutting up all of the paper into its 4 quarters. So you can see here is the paper all cut into the 4 different pieces. And then I just need to rearrange the whole thing in order to turn it into a tessellation shape. So I took 1/2 and put it to the other side, like so. And then I take the bottom pieces and put them up at the top so that all of the uncut corners of the paper meet up in the middle. And here you can see that this shape is a lot less square, it's a lot more dynamic, and it is going to make the pattern look a lot less like building bricks of the same thing over and over again. The next thing I wanted to do was to digitize my pattern, so I took a photo of it on the floor and then brought it into Photoshop and started tracing over my drawing. I really wish I was more skilled with Photoshop, but I really did my best and I think it worked out, especially since the aesthetic was meant to be more cute and not super duper clean. So it was okay if my lines were just a little shaky and imperfect. It just kind of added to the folksy charm of the design. At least that's what I keep telling myself. Another struggle with this step in the process was just trying to match the colors of the cards, and I did not do a very good job of color matching between what is on the computer and what we picked out. Part of that was time constraints. I didn't give myself enough time throughout the week to make sure that everything ended up perfect, but I do have time now to finesse the colors and try to figure that out before we end up doing the painting. And that was part of the point of getting it on the computer at all as well, just so that we could really get an idea of how the colors work together and how those colors work with the design overall. But back to what I'm doing, I feel like the clumsiness of me with this tool also lent itself to making it look a little bit more like a woodcut and less like something that was a drawing, which I really like as well. I made minor corrections to some of the forms as I went, and I also decided to try and limit the color palette a little bit more than we had picked out. I thought that it might simplify and clean up the design a little bit if I did that. I also decided that it would help amplify that woodcut idea of the design if instead of adding a dark color, I used the eraser and had a darker background. really surprised that I was able to pull it off to the extent that I was able to. It's not exactly what I was thinking, but I think that it's pretty awesome. I've never been super great at very cutesy type drawings, so I'm really happy with what I was able to design. Before we go ahead and paint the pattern onto my niece's wall, we are going to just mess with the colors and really finalize which colors we want to go where. I'm not entirely sure how I am going to get this pattern onto the wall. I'm thinking stencils, I'm kind of thinking stamps, but I don't have a super solid idea yet. If you liked anything about this video, go ahead and hit the like button. And if you would like to see more of what I do art, I do sewing, and I do home improvement projects, and then I just do random stuff. And so if you think that you would like to see more of what I do, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, and then I can see you in the next video. Bye.